Number 10. James Gordon Jr., also known as X-Strike. James Gordon Jr. is a sociopath who in the New Earth continuity believed that empathy made you weak and set out to prove as much to Batman. While he is just a sociopathic murderer who enjoys hurting other people, James also happens to have a genius-level intellect, which is obviously a pretty deadly combination. In the story Black Mirror, he set out to administer medication he had made to infants which increases psychotic tendencies, a medication he himself was using, supplementing the meds that would have helped to subdue those tendencies and calm those instincts within him. It took a while before the Bat family or the Gordons managed to figure out that something was not right when James returned. Although at least his dad, Commissioner Jim Gordon, had instincts that something was pretty much up right away and decided to follow those, which ultimately allowed James's plot to be uncovered and for him to be apprehended in the end. In the Prime Earth continuity, he was part of the Suicide Squad and was known for being their analyst. James also seems to be one of those villains who dies in stories but then always somehow comes back. I feel like he's done that at least a couple times, so although he's dead right now, he'll probably come back at some point. If I was writing, I'd bring him back. I like James Gordon Jr. Number 9. Holiday. Holiday has to be one of the most unexpected villains in Batman and Gotham's rogue gallery, and an accomplished unexpected villain at that. Holiday was a serial killer who seemed to be targeting the criminal mob family known as the Falcones with his targets. However, then the Maroni family was also targeted, another massive crime family in Gotham. This created a lot of tension between Sal Maroni and Carmine Falcone, the head of both families respectively. However, in the end, Holiday wiped out not just many of the people and members of the Falcones, but also killed various members of the Maroni family as well, with the killings taking place on holidays. In the end, Batman and Jim Gordon managed to apprehend Holiday, but only after he had successfully killed Sal Maroni on Labor Day. Holiday turned out to be the youngest son of Carmine Falcone, Alberto, who wanted to prove himself and get revenge for being excluded from the family business. Although in reality, this was pretty much done to protect him. Wow, that's unfortunate. Holiday would later face off with Calendar Man, and after being wounded would be smothered to death by his sister. Tragic. Number 8. Calendar Man. Well, of course I gotta put Calendar Man above since he beat Holiday, and that's how it goes. For a guy that pulls off crimes inspired by different holidays, seasons, and calendar dates, Calendar Man can actually be surprisingly successful and terrifying. In his first encounter with Batman, Calendar Man managed to pull off 4 crimes successfully before he was caught. Aside from that, over the years, Calendar Man in the comics has taken his crimes to the next level, even going so far as to murder families as part of a Thanksgiving Day crime spree, sitting down to steal a plate of dinner after successfully wiping out an entire targeted family. That is pretty dark. Of course, Calendar Man's weakness tends to be similar to Riddler's, namely that he leaves clues as to how to capture him often, and we always know his crimes will revolve around notable days in the calendar, so makes it pretty easy to watch out for him. Like, is a holiday coming up? Well, we should probably watch out for Calendar Man. Number 7. Owlman. Pretty much everything about Owlman from Earth 3's crime syndicate is unexpected. He's the evil counterpart to Batman, but is not Earth 3's version of Bruce. Instead, he is Thomas Wayne Jr., who on his Earth was Bruce's older brother. He himself plotted to kill his parents as he believed they were mismanaging their wealth, which would of course end up being his inheritance. In the end, Bruce refused to help Thomas and even attempted to convince him to halt his plot. So Thomas Jr., saddened, was forced to kill his brother, having had much higher hopes for young Bruce. Thomas would then become Owlman and use a combination of fear, wealth, and influence to take control of Gotham. Still missing his brother, he decided to find someone to fill that hole in his heart. After meeting Dick Grayson at the circus, Thomas orchestrated the death of his parents in secret and then offered him support and a home, manipulating him into becoming his sidekick, Talon. Yeah, pretty shocking stuff. Number 6. Hush. Hush has managed to pull off some of the most horrific schemes over the years and gotten under Batman's skin many times, and Catwoman's skin even, when he literally stole her heart. Thomas Elliot is not only a powerful villain because of his intense vendetta against the Wayne family and Batman, but because he also is often shown to have the skill and strength to match Batman, as well as the cunning. He has taken Batman in hand-to-hand combat and fared surprisingly well, and he's managed to set into motion outlandish plots like impersonating Bruce Wayne by giving himself plastic surgery to make himself look nearly identical, then capturing and threatening the real Bruce Wayne with murder and disfigurement so that he could ultimately take his place. Number 5. Darkseid. I know what you're thinking, but Amanda, none of us are surprised that Darkseid is super powerful. It's, kinda his thing. I know Darkseid is super powerful. But remember earlier on when I said that some villains are simply surprising because they happen to go toe-to-toe with Batman at all? Well, Darkseid is one of those villains. Because he's just so powerful, it makes little sense that Batman would even be able to face him. I'm not knocking Batman here, by the way, just acknowledging that he, at the end of the day, is just a very well-trained, skilled, rich man in a bat suit. So yeah. And yet he has also managed to defeat Darkseid on more than one occasion, which is only even more unexpected and surprising. But I guess it's these unexpected storylines that we find so exhilarating and help to sell comics. So when it comes down to why they were written, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's the unexpected matches that are the stories people get excited to write and fans get excited to read. Number 4. Harley Quinn. Harley is just unexpected because of, where she started from in the Batverse. She was introduced in the Batman animated series as Joker's sidekick and girlfriend, and she became such a fan favorite that she was made a regular there even though she was kind of intended to be a one-off character, and would eventually make her way into the comics as well. From there, Harley's popularity meant we'd see her win all kinds of victories, or at least almost win them, and in the animated series she'd also prove how dangerous she was when she came up with some of the most potentially successful schemes, which of course often irritated her partner in crime and her partner in life, Mr. J. Over the years, Harley has become so successful and powerful in fact that she has moved more and more away from being a villain and more towards heroic acts, with her now even becoming one of Batman's sidekicks in the comics. For a human, Harley is also shown being very strong, flexible, and durable in addition to being brilliant, often using her intellect or her unpredictable craziness to outsmart many of her opponents. Let's just remember that at one point she took on Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman all at once and was actually successful in that encounter. Number 3. Poison Ivy. We all know how powerful Ivy is at this point, but it should also be acknowledged that initially she was just a student studying to be a botanist who ended up being used in her teacher's/lover's twisted experiment. She then became something new, something deadly, the villain and creature we'd come to know as Poison Ivy. Ivy was initially shown to be immune to all poisons and was interested in crime for basically the sake of status and power, able to use pheromones and kisses to influence her enemies. The power of seduction. I don't know what this is. This is seduction, apparently. Since then, Ivy has come a long way at one point, even taking control of the whole world, controlling everyone's minds through plant life that they had consumed. She also became a full-on terrifying eco-terrorist, and since the very real and also fictional world of eco-horror continues to grow, so does Ivy's power and presence in the comics, especially now that she's returned to her more traditional, villainous ways. Which is also kind of unexpected, because she was down this hero path and then they were like, she's a villain again. And I was like, huh? Alright. Number 2. Karma. Just because you are considered a low-level thug, or in Fleet Delmar's case a supposed freedom fighter, doesn't mean you can't rise above your rank and become something greater. That is just what Fleet did. He ended up getting his hands on some alien tech that allowed him to move up to the next level when it came to his rank as a threatening and powerful Batman villain. He was supposedly apprehended by Batman years before, who had tormented him with fear gas as punishment for his crimes. It's pretty harsh, really. This experience apparently led to him losing his eyes and becoming blind, which is why he decided to seize the alien tech and use it to get revenge. The helmet he wore granted him psychic powers, allowing him to read the minds of his opponent and counteract their attacks easily in a fight. The helmet also allowed him to absorb energy blasts, which at one point allowed Karma to take on both Black Lightning and Batman at the same time. And then he went on to have a semi-successful career with the League of Assassins, so, he died, but still. Pretty crazy for just like a low-level thug in my opinion. Number 1. Phantasm. Phantasm is of course unexpected given that she had a secret identity, and in the animated series we even expected her to be a he instead of a she, so that's pretty unexpected. Andrea Beaumont is also one of those very powerful and strong villains for the fact that she holds a lot of sway over Bruce Wayne, being one of his love interests as well. Not only that, but when it comes to many of her skills and her physical prowess, she is often shown to match Batman and be on a very similar level to him, which is of course quite quite impressive, because Batman is pretty crazy. Andrea is also surprisingly more ruthless in comparison to Bruce, having no qualms with killing those who cross her, whereas Bruce typically holds back from killing, at least in the current continuity. In his original days, not so much. So not only does she potentially have him as an ally at times, but she also has all the skill, strength, and know-how to use their relationship and her knowledge of Bruce to her advantage when playing the role of antagonist.
Coming in at number 10, we've got a video game honorable mention with the Wolverine symbiote from the game Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. In this title's storyline, Wolverine has traveled to New York City to deal with a growing symbiote infestation, and even briefly fights Spider-Man when he believes the wall crawler is actually Venom. Unfortunately for Wolverine, he finds himself overwhelmed by actual symbiotes on top of a church and attacks Spider-Man again as the Wolverine symbiote. With all of his usual healing abilities on top of all the symbiote enhancements that the alien parasites offer, this version of Wolverine might just be one of the grossest versions we've ever gotten to see. Coming in at number 9, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 8, we've got a live-action detour with X-24 from the 2017 film Logan. An allegedly perfect clone of Wolverine, but with none of the compassion or humanity, X-24 was treated like an attack dog and followed the orders of Xander Rice to hunt down and capture the real Wolverine and the young mutant girl he was protecting. Based on Wolverine during his prime years, he was able to physically overcome the true Wolverine and was only able to be defeated at the last minute by a bullet made of pure adamantium right to the skull. Coming in at number 7, we have the vicious Vampire Lord Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bitten and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become their leader. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty terrifying rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting duo. Coming in at number 6, we have the infamous zombie Wolverine. Many superheroes and villains of the Marvel Universe found themselves infected with an undead plague on the alternate world of Earth 2149, but Wolverine might be the character who experienced the oddest side effects from becoming a member of the Zombie Legion. Initially fighting alongside Magneto to help defeat the undead threat with the X-Men, Wolverine was eventually bitten and overwhelmed while attempting to defend Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s main base of operations. Turning against Magneto, this version of Wolverine slowly discovered his healing factor was affected by his zombification, meaning his arms could no longer support the adamantium claws throughout his body. Attacking any living thing he could with the shreds that remained of his limbs, this version of Wolverine would go on to even consume Galactus, becoming a cosmic undead threat to the rest of this very doomed Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 5, we have the villainous Wolverine of an alternate future, Saberclaw. Hailing from Earth 982, this son of Wolverine and an unknown woman absolutely hates his original father, so much so that it seems to have literally changed him into appearing more reminiscent of Sabretooth than his actual dad. Wearing adamantium sheaths on his bone claws to make them even deadlier, Saberclaw was briefly a member of this universe's Sinister Six before eventually being convinced to put his differences aside with his father and help defend the world from the threat of Galactus and the daughter of Loki. Just another day in complicated comic book family dynamics. Coming in at number 4, we have Daken, the dark son of Wolverine. Named after the Japanese term for mongrel dog, Daken is the tragic child that Wolverine never knew about, his mother being murdered before Wolverine even knew he had a kid. Cut from his mother's body, Daken was raised to hate his father, and in their very first encounter, slashed open his stomach and left him to die. With the same incredible healing abilities and bone claws as his dad, Daken has had a long road of trying to find his proper place in the world, and has fought on the sides of both good and evil over the course of his tragic life, but hopefully he'll stay more on the side of good going forward. Coming in at number 3, we have Hydra Wolverine. Hailing from the reality known as Earth 1720, this version of Wolverine is fully committed to the evil ideology of the organization Hydra, complete with a new green and yellow color scheme to his costume. Married to this universe's version of the Invisible Woman, who also happens to be this universe's version of Madam Hydra, this Wolverine was apparently successful in conquering his home reality along with his lover, and has since begun to travel the multiverse searching for more worlds to destroy in the universe's most twisted romantic honeymoon. Luckily for the Marvel multiverse, this Wolverine would be defeated by a variant of Kitty Pryde and the rest of the Exiles, who wound up tricking him into stabbing himself with his own adamantium claws. Better luck next time, Hydra. Coming in at number 2, we have the Wolverine from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In an alternate world where Charles Xavier is dead and Magneto is leader of the X-Men, Wolverine is a brutal warrior named Weapon X who has to be constantly subdued by the psychic abilities of Jean Grey in order to be a functioning member of the X-Men team. Eventually losing a hand while going on a suicide mission to rescue this version of Jean from a version of Cyclops, this version of Wolverine for a time had heroic ambitions, but gave them up after being granted the power of the Celestials and turned into Weapon Omega, now determined to bring about the evolutionary future that he'd initially stop the mutant apocalypse from achieving, and declaring war against all of humanity. This new Weapon Omega is the farthest thing possible from Wolverine's usual heroics. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Brother Mutant, an evil variant of Wolverine combined with some of his greatest allies and greatest foes. On Earth 127, a male variant of the Scarlet Witch, known as the Scarlet Warlock, attempted to cast a spell that would transfer Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to Magneto, thus giving Magneto an incredible power boost given his magnetic abilities. However, something with the spell went wrong, and the Scarlet Warlock, Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, and the villain Mesmero were all merged into a singular being known as Brother Mutant. All 5 of these mutants' powers combined into one villainous figure, Brother Mutant was such a powerful threat that a multiversal team of other, more heroic Wolverines had to be assembled specifically to stop him, just to ensure that all of that power wasn't unleashed on the rest of the Marvel multiverse.
Number 10, J. Jonah Jameson. While JJ might not seem like the craziest supervillain out there, he has his moments, truly. Sure, he's just a guy who most of the time causes Spider-Man more grief in his civilian identity of Peter Parker as his loudmouthed, often angry, and demanding boss. But if he gets his hands on robots, whew, watch out. JJ isn't at the level of world domination underestimation, but for the most part, Spider-Man fans generally just think of JJ as a nuisance, a menace, if you will, to Peter's everyday life. However, JJ has not only threatened Peter's livelihood and Spider-Man's reputation, but has also even gone toe-to-toe with Spider-Man himself, and even at one point took on She-Hulk. Typically, he's at his most dangerous whenever he gets his hands on the Spider Slayer robots or armor, which he often uses to more directly hunt Spider-Man or other heroes down himself, using muscles, or robo-muscles I guess, as opposed to just the written word. And let's not forget that the written word and media itself are also way more powerful than we maybe give them credit for, both in the comics and in real life. Number 9, Sandman. The only thing that really holds Sandman back from being so deadly is his own disinterest in crime. In the end, Sandman often resents what he has become and even grows to resent being a criminal. There are even times in the comics when Sandman has tried to turn over a new leaf and go against his story as a villain, becoming reformed uninformed, preferring to stay neutral, lawful, and of course even at times teaming up and aiding heroes. This is really what holds him back though. That, and in some cases, the vacuum cleaner. Though really that shouldn't have been able to hold Sandman at all, considering that he can control the sand that makes him up, which means that, yeah, he can just kinda like move out of the vacuum cleaner, right? As sand particles. Sand is a powerful substance. It can cut you, it can get inside a wound, it's minuscule, it can get through and into almost any room or location, as it can pass through the smallest nooks and crannies. Sandman is also virtually immortal and can create duplicates of himself, allowing him to access a giant form by balling up all of these duplicates together. Now imagine if he did something like this, but on the scale of all of the sand in the world. Let's not forget that scientists have estimated that there are more grains of sand on planet Earth than stars within our universe. I know stars are bigger than grains of sand, but still, there's a lot of sand on this planet, like a lot of sand. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Spider-Man villains, let us know by clicking that like button. Number 8, Morbius. Another villain that is really only curbed, I think, because of his often more heroic nature and sense of humanity, is Morbius. Okay, so Morbius might not be a global level threat like we were talking about in the intro, but he's definitely more powerful than you might think. A lot of people probably don't think about Morbius much at all, I imagine. But like the Lizard, if he's completely feral and unreserved, he's pretty dangerous. Recently in the comics, we saw that Morbius is back to being a fearsome, uncontrolled, ruled by his hunger, pseudo-science vampire when he comes up against Ben Reilly's Spider-Man during the Beyond Spider-Man event. Ben struggled to fight against Morbius, and if it wasn't for some help from Beyond, he may have even died as a result of their battle. In the end, it took the Daughters of the Dragon duo, Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, together to take down Morbius, and even then, they may have only been able to do so because Morbius at that point was missing an arm. Dr. Michael Morbius can be quite strong when his power is completely unleashed, and there's nothing holding him back. Number 7, Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson isn't a villain anymore in the comics, but he did start out as one. And from his humble beginnings, you likely would not have imagined that he'd become so powerful as a character. Flash Thompson started out as Peter Parker's schoolyard bully. He didn't have any powers, he was just kind of a jerk. Over time though, Flash became less of an oaf and eventually even became a friend to Peter. He then goes on to serve in the military, becoming a decorated hero, and even becomes a superhero after he becomes Agent Venom, teaming up with the Venom symbiote, who also has a villainous origin story. Sure, Agent Anti-Venom, aka Flash Thompson, probably won't be the guy threatening the entire world, because, well, he's a hero, but he definitely now possesses enough power to instead be a hero who could potentially save the world. And considering that he was just your average run-of-the-mill high school bully, you probably wouldn't have expected him to come so far. Number 6, Sauron. I've always felt bad for Sauron. Like, this dude does not get enough love when it comes to our boosting of supervillains here on the channel. I know Sauron seems kinda silly on paper, but he's also pretty diabolical and deadly when he wants to be. And if the person writing the character also believes in his prowess. Sauron can temporarily absorb mutant powers, is super strong, and somehow has functional pterodactyl hands that he can use to pick up weapons and items. I don't even know how he does that. That's nuts to me. Sauron is also an energy vampire, which means his powers are literally deadly. He needs life force energy to live, and when he absorbs life force energy, it can actually result in the death of his victim. Honestly, I think if he just had the right team up, he could be pretty unstoppable. Maybe with X-Men Green, he'll be able to do something crazy. I really want X-Men Green to be like a supervillain team, like kind of like Poison Ivy. Like, we're villains, but we're like saving the planet. Number 5, Sin Eater. Sin Eater saw a massive power upgrade recently. Initially, he was just a crazed man obsessed with absolving the sins of others through killing them. But more recently, in Nick Spencer's run on Spider-Man in 2020, he became so much more than that. In issue number 46, we see Sin Eater with newfound powers to actually absorb and absolve the sin of villains, and with those sins, he would also gain their powers. This meant that the sky was almost the limit for just how powerful of a villain Sin Eater could become. However, after learning that he was being manipulated by Kindred and kinda used as a pawn, Sin Eater became distraught and ended up taking his own life. He would later be resurrected as a corpse, but we don't really know what happened to said corpse after he was brought back and the fight against Kindred sort of came to a close. He could still be out there somewhere though, and who knows, he could have some of his former hyped up powers. I doubt it, but Even if he doesn't, he did have it at one point, so I think we should count it. It was pretty cool. Number 4, Chameleon. Chameleon is definitely a hero who deserves more love and respect, or at least more disdain if you love to hate the greatest villains. He was the first villain that Spider-Man ever faced in his own series. A lot of people don't think of shapeshifters or masters of disguise first when it comes to power levels, but the reality is someone who is really good at disguising themselves as other people can be one of the most deadly and unstoppable villains around. I mean, look at what Mystique managed to do recently in X-Men's Inferno series, or look at what Chameleon might seemingly be up to currently in Devil's Reign. Not only is Chameleon great at creating chaos and hurting others by disguising himself as them, but he also is pretty good at just hatching plans as well. Number 3, Kingpin. When it comes to Kingpin, we usually think of him as a threat confined to New York City. In fact, some people don't even think of Kingpin at all when it comes to Spider-Man. Over the years, Kingpin has become more synonymous with the superhero Daredevil, even though Kingpin's first appearance was actually in a Spider-Man comic, making his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 50 during the original 1963 series. Lately in the comics, Kingpin has been setting his sights on a much more grand prize than just causing grief for New York, its citizens, and its heroes. He is taking on all of the superheroes based in the US that oppose him as he aims to run for president, using Kilgrave, yes, the Purple Man's powers, to encourage everyone to vote for him. Or else. Superheroes who do not ally themselves with Kingpin in this endeavor will face his wrath during Marvel's Devil's Reign event. Number 2, Mysterio. Another villain that often gets dismissed when it comes to Spider-Man's rogues gallery is Mysterio. Mysterio is a villain that is all smoke and mirrors, and illusions, which makes a lot of folks consider him to be not so real of a threat. Still, in the cinematic take on the character, we saw Mysterio almost completely fool the entire world, or while even being defeated, he kind of still did that. His plan here was to convince everyone that he was a hero and win them over to his side, and even despite seemingly dying, he actually still managed to kind of succeed. In the Old Man Logan universe, Mysterio is also the one behind defeating pretty much all of the X-Men by tricking Wolverine into thinking all of his friends were really supervillains, thereby getting Wolverine to kill the entire X-Men team and the school. Yikes. In other words, just because you think something isn't real doesn't mean that you shouldn't still fear it and that it can't still hurt you. A great illusion can be more powerful than actual action in some cases. Number 1, Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus is a villain that might be well respected among Spider-Man fans, but on a greater scale, he's not likely someone you think of when you think of a global level supervillain threat. But while he might not share the status of comic book villains like Doctor Doom, it doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve to instill that level of fear among the superhero community. Dr. Octopus might seem a bit silly with his haircut and his mechanical arms and his sometimes snazzy white suit and sunglasses, but let's not forget that he's actually a diabolical super genius whose brilliance combined with the sheer strength of his claws makes him a dangerous person to cross. Some might say he's just superior.
Number 10, Mr. Bloom. The concept of darkness is one that is intrinsically tied to Batman. I mean, everyone should come to expect it from a character referred to as the Dark Knight. So it only makes sense to put the character up against the opposite of darkness, light, and that is where Mr. Bloom comes to play. His past, as well as his motives, remain a mystery to this day, but in no way does that mean he didn't leave a huge impact on Gotham City. With the ability to bestow powers onto any other human being at the cost of shortening that individual's life, Mr. Bloom provided these quote-unquote seeds to a select few, and crime blossomed and grew like a weed from the lowest reaches of Gotham City. Not only could he bestow powers onto others through his seeds though, he also had some powers of his own, including mechakinesis, pyrokinesis, cryokinesis, science alteration, and of course, superhuman strength and agility. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 2015's Batman Volume 2, all the way until his death in 2016's Batman Volume 2, number 50. Number 9, Black Spider. When Eric Needham was a young lad, he unfortunately became addicted to drugs and turned to a life of crime in order to fuel that addiction. He raided and robbed his father's liquor store and actually killed his old man in the process, which landed him in jail where he kicked that nasty drug habit and took up a life of fighting the war on drugs. Donning a costume, he became a self-styled vigilante and began killing those suspected of dealing any sort of drugs. Now in his mind, Batman and him had a common enemy and they should have been allies, but the Dark Knight thought differently due to Needham's tendency to, kill. Batman interfered with his plans many times, and that led to Needham turning to a life of crime instead, teaming up with some of the other villains in order to get revenge on Batman. During his crusade, Needham's wife and son were killed by a drug lord who had discovered the Black Spider's identity, and in a rage, the Spider prepared for one final assault. After being shot multiple times, Needham invaded the drug lord's headquarters and detonated explosives strapped to his back, killing the drug dealers in the process. Give his story a read for yourself, starting with 1976's Detective Comics number 463. Number 8. The Black and White Bandit. Once a successful artist, Roscoe Chiara was commissioned to paint a portrait of Windsor Munzell, the head of a chemical corporation. His company had created some new pigments specifically for painting, however, Chiara did not know that the paints were untested, and began to have these serious headaches. On the final end of painting, Chiara fell asleep and awoke to a colorless sunrise, because he had gone completely colorblind as a result of the pigments. To get his revenge, he became the Black and White Bandit and began a campaign against Munzell, stealing various pieces of art from his collection and his museum. He doesn't have any powers per se, but he is a master of disguise, as he has been seen as a blind man and a nun, and he is also a getaway master thanks to his zebra. It didn't take long for Batman to catch wind of what was going on, and after 2 encounters, he defeated the Black and White Bandit with only a false advertisement and just a punch to the nose. He hasn't really been seen since, but it's presumed that he is reformed or he's either still in jail. We're not 100% sure. Check him out in 2001's Batman Gotham Knights, number 12. Number 7. Amygdala. Prone to fits of homicidal rage, Aaron Helsinger was put in the care of Arkham Asylum and had his amygdala cluster removed, in hopes of curing his psychotic episodes. It actually ended up doing the exact opposite though, and Aaron became even more angry than before. During his time at Arkham, Aaron became a pawn of Jeremiah Arkham and was used to attack Batman many times to try and break his spirits, but you know, it's Batman, so that didn't really happen. A short time later, Bane orchestrated a massive breakout at Arkham Asylum, and all of the patients, including Amygdala, were freed, and he teamed up with the ventriloquist to wreak some havoc on Gotham City. It didn't take long for Batman to take down Amygdala and arrest him, sending him to Blackgate Penitentiary, where he became the star member of the prison softball team. He was eventually released and actually lived in the same apartment building as Dick Grayson for a while, all until Blockbuster blew up the entire apartment complex. Check out Amygdala for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1992's Batman, Shadow of the Bat, number 3. Number 6. Merrymaker. Dr. Byron Meredith was a crazed doctor that worked at Arkham Asylum who used pretty interesting methods to treat and rehabilitate his patients, his favorite being torture. Byron was one of the few doctors who could actually tolerate the Joker, and he ended up becoming obsessed with him and just studied him endlessly until he was fired and went into a solo practice. Eventually creating the costume for the Merrymaker, Meredith created that role so that he could lead his 4 new Joker-obsessed patients into a life of crime. Meredith's plan was to create this uncanny society so that the 4 would do his bidding. While the Joker-themed criminals attacked civilians, Meredith would sneak into a nearby building where one of his enemies, either his ex-wife, her lawyer, etc. would be, and this way he could easily perform a kill, while the members of the League of Smiles would attract Batman and the GCPD's attention. Check the Merrymaker and the League of Smiles out for yourself in 2013's Detective Comics Volume 2, number 16. Number 5. Zombie. Best known as an associate of Bane, Zombie was actually a pretty big reason behind Bane being able to become one of Gotham's best known criminals. He was once an assistant at the medical facility that gave Bane his abilities, and he then aided Bane in escaping prison, and was the one who found a way for Bane to get his daily dose of venom. Shortly after Bird's encounter with Batman, Bane defeated the Dark Knight and his rise to power started. Bird, Trog, and Zombie started a rampage over the city to eliminate competition and recruit more members to Bane's crime empire, as they were commanded by their boss, of course. Bird, Trog, and Zombie were sent by Bane to verify the supposed threat of a new Batman, and the 3 of them were brutally defeated by the new Dark Knight. They were arrested and locked away by the police, and each of them were interrogated about Bane's activities, but none of them revealed anything because they are good henchmen. They did eventually break out of prison, but it didn't take too long for them to end up back there. Check out Zombie in his first appearance in 1993's Batman Vengeance of Bane, number 1. Number 4. Mr. Camera. Called Mr. Camera for obvious reasons, because of the camera lens helmet he used to wear on his crimes, and also because he employed all sorts of photographic devices on his criminal raids. Used to record his crimes, and on one very special day, he actually managed to get some footage of Batman and Robin in their secret identities. Although he was captured that same day because, Batman and Robin really didn't want that information to get out, he did manage to hide the tape, hoping to use it eventually against the dynamic duo. Not too long after, Batman and Robin found the tape and discovered that the footage was actually too obscure to even see anything, which meant that their secret had never actually been exposed and that they had nothing to worry about at all. This particular version of Mr. Camera was unfortunately erased from the DC Comics history after Crisis on Infinite Earths, but there have been some one-off appearances in recent years of this character. Check him out for yourself, starting with 1954's Batman number 81. Number 3. Lockup. Lyle Bolton, aka Lockup, is another non-powered villain who specialized in incarceration, high-tech security weapons, and escapology. He was first seen capturing the criminals Charaxus and Maxwell VZ, but decided that these minor villains were too easy for him and went for the big guns in the form of Two-Face, who he successfully captured and took back to his private prison. He is eventually stopped by the police while targeting a criminal turned state evidence and is revealed to be Lyle Bolton, who was previously discharged from the police academy for being too gung-ho and dismissed from several security jobs. Later during the events of No Man's Land, having taken control of Blackgate Prison in the aftermath of the Cataclysm, he enlisted the KG Beast and the Trigger Twins to act as the wardens for his prison and ruled with an iron fist, but Batman tolerated his presence because he required Lockup to keep captured criminals in check to prevent Gotham from being overrun with them. Lockup was kept under strict orders to treat the prisoners well, and then towards the end of the event, Batman enlisted Nightwing's help to overthrow Lockup so Blackgate could be used by the lawful authorities once again. Check him out in his first appearance in 1996's Robin Volume 2, number 24. Number 2. Johnny Stitches. A Gotham City underboss for the Intergang, Johnny Donetto worked for Tobias Wales until he was caught stealing from him and was subjected to some pretty serious torture and mutilation, and just straight up thrown out of a window to die in an alley. Thankfully, he was found by Bruno Mannheim, who thought that Johnny had some potential, and he had Desaad fix him and stitch him up as best he could. Now operating under the name Johnny Stitches, he worked aggressively to remove the remaining large criminals in Gotham after the deportations of all supervillains from Earth. With his newfound power over people, Stitches used the Iceberg Lounge as a meeting place for Intergang and would eventually cause Penguin some pretty big trouble with the various vigilantes of the city. After Batman's sudden disappearance, Stitches organized a wager in Intergang's HQ, but they were interrupted by Vigilante, who broke into the place and challenged Stitches with the intention of killing him. Arming himself with a knife, Stitches was about to start his attack, but Vigilante was suddenly attacked by an invisible person that pushed him out of the building. Check him out in 2008's Gotham Underground, number 3. Number 1. Film Freak II. Known only as Edison, this man is the second film freak, a disturbed cinephile who had a strange obsession with Catwoman, and ran a late-night WUAB TV Studios operated show displaying amateur film clips made by his underlings. After obtaining footage from one of his henchmen showing Selina Kyle and Holly both wearing their Catwoman suits, he poisoned his goons, citing Alfred Hitchcock's suspicion, in order to not let him divulge the information. He later deduced the real Catwoman, Selina, was hiding in Gotham City under the pseudonym of Irina Dubrovna, the main character of Val Lewton's 1942 film Cat People. He, along with Angleman, broke into Selina's apartment and threatened her infant daughter Helena. Eventually, due to Film Freak's obsession with shots and filming, she was able to incapacitate both of them, thankfully. She also asked her friend Zatanna to wipe her identity from their minds, similar to what she had done earlier with Dr. Light, and made them confess to their crimes to the authorities. Fast forward a bit, and in his final act of villainy, we see him manage to get his hands on an atom bomb, paying homage to Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, and while citing Network, announced on live TV that all Gothamites would have had their lives saved if they were able to solve a film-themed riddle. However, after shooting a movie critic that he employed to deliver the uranium for the bomb, Film Freak was finally defeated by Catwoman, who also managed to defuse the bomb.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Iron Goblin. Coming from an alternate universe where the Spider Island event wound up being permanent, Tony Stark was initially transformed into a human-spider hybrid under the control of the villainous Spider Queen. During a battle with the Resistance, however, Tony was sprayed with the same goblin formula that had corrupted the mind of Norman Osborn, transforming Tony Stark into the Iron Goblin, with a mechanical new costume to match. And while this version of Tony would eventually decide to sacrifice himself in a last moment of humanity before his goblin insanity fully took over, the combination of Iron Man and Green Goblin tech is still a pretty terrifying combo that Spider-Man should hope never reappears. Coming in at number 9, we have the corrupted Iron Man from the controversial 90s event, The Crossing. When a variant of the time-traveling villain Kang the Conqueror, known as Immortus, began using the neural link in the Iron Man suit to secretly begin altering Tony Stark's brainwaves, Iron Man became a sleeper agent within the Avengers and eventually attacked his companions outright after secretly manipulating them for years. While eventually defeated by a time-traveling 19-year-old version of himself, and then retconned into Tony going back to his usual status quo in the Marvel Universe, this controversial storyline shows what would happen if Iron Man truly turned out to be a traitor. Coming in at number 8, we have Iron Thor. During the event that saw God Emperor Doom in control of a Marvel universe converted into a new Battleworld, Doom maintained his complete control over the many realms of Battleworld with a police force army known as the Thor Corps. One of the most powerful of Doom's personal army was the being known as Iron Thor, wearing a combination of the Iron Man armor and Thor's iconic helmet, and investigating any potential rebellions to his master Doom's rule. Even capable of wielding Mjolnir, this super powerful character still managed to be murdered by the hero Warrior Woman as an example of rebellion against Emperor Doom. He might have had a short life, but man, I really love that Iron Thor design. Coming in at number 7, we have the Steel Corpse. Hailing from Earth 11326, this version of Iron Man was pretty similar to our own, but with two key differences. He's permanently fused with his suit, and he absolutely hates mutants. Fighting alongside other villainous Avengers to wipe out this universe's X-Men, this Iron Man's natural body died long ago after being melded with his machinery, and thus he jokingly calls himself the Steel Corpse as a way of coping with his morbid situation. This version of Iron Man had complete mastery of his weaponry, as they were literally a part of his body, and only a last-second change of heart before sacrificing himself stops this Tony Stark from being one of the absolute worst. Coming in at number 6, we have the infamous Iron Patriot, aka Norman Osborn. Best known as being the alter ego of Spider-Man's nemesis, the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn has long been one of the biggest threats in the Marvel Universe, manipulating events from afar as the CEO of Oscorp. Following the invasion of Earth by the Skrull army, Norman found himself suddenly in the public eye and with goodwill after being the one to personally defeat the Skrull Queen. Norman would use this influence to lead the Dark Avengers as the Iron Patriot, a twisted version of Iron Man combined with Captain America's patriotism that tricked the public into trusting Norman, and showing that Tony Stark is definitely not the worst billionaire in the Marvel world. Coming in at number 5, we have the Iron Maniac. On the dark alternate world of Earth 5012, most of the superheroes of this reality are dead after an unknown fatal error made by Reed Richards. A vengeful and violent Tony Stark makes it his life's mission to get revenge on Reed and modifies his armor to resemble that of Reed's worst enemy, Dr. Doom. This insane version of Iron Man killed the Human Torch and was eventually banished to the main Marvel universe, where he had to be subdued by the combined efforts of Spider-Man, Captain America, and Black Widow, who found it a bit unnerving to be fighting such a far-gone version of one of their closest allies. This Tony was just as resourceful as the real one, however, as he'd even escape custody by building a new suit from the remains of a life model decoy. Pretty resourceful for an insane Iron Man. Coming in at number 4, we have the Superior Iron Man. During an event known as Axis, many Marvel heroes and villains had their morality completely inverted, with good guys becoming bad, bad guys becoming good, and so on and so forth. One of the few changes that wasn't reversed by the end of the event, however, was the morality of Iron Man, who in his evil form still possessed all of the intelligence and dark aspects of Tony's personality, and managed to build a shield for himself to prevent being turned into a hero again. Infecting much of the planet with a new version of the Extremis virus, and using artificially intelligent drones to assert his dominance, this version of Tony was only finally cured by the Marvel Universe's collapse into Battleworld resetting his morals, meaning that this was a villain that the rest of the Avengers didn't even manage to properly defeat. Coming in at number 3, we have Obadiah Stane, aka the Ironmonger in the very first Iron Man film. It's become a bit of a meme at this point that many of the supervillains of the MCU are dark reflections of the same powers and personalities as the heroes they're opposing, and the Ironmonger is the origin of that trope in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Completely guilt-free about selling weapons to all sides, Stane is a ruthless businessman willing to do anything to maintain control of Stark Industries, and shows just how awful powerful Tony's new technology could be used in the wrong hands, and what a monster he could become if he gave up on his deepest morals. Although, honestly, the fact that his idea of upgrading the Iron Man suit is just to make the original one bigger, maybe he's not quite as smart as Tony after all. Coming in at number 2, we have the evil Emperor Stark. Hailing from the destroyed world of Earth 42777, this version of Iron Man was perhaps the cruelest the multiverse had ever seen, as he manipulated Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants into declaring war on humanity, then used the resulting anti-mutant backlash to secure power as the world's only superhero. Holding entire countries hostage with natural disasters and even spreading plagues among his own citizens, this version of Tony declared himself Emperor Stark, taking the cloak of Doctor Doom as a final trophy. This was Iron Man at his most evil, and he was an incredibly powerful threat when encountered by the multiverse-traveling Exiles, only eventually defeated by his own universe's last superhero survivor, Sue Storm. A tragic end for a tragic villain. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Zombie Iron Man. When Earth 2149 was first hit by the zombie plague that's since been highlighted in multiple Marvel spin-off series, this version of Iron Man attempted to use teleportation technology to escape to a different universe with Nick Fury. However, a zombified Fantastic Four arrived too quickly for this plan, and Tony was bitten, becoming a living corpse inside his metal armor and developing a bloodlust and pure hunger for human flesh. Still surviving even after having his legs blasted off by the Silver Surfer, the zombified Iron Man would go on to lead the rest of the undead heroes and villains in an attack against Galactus and gain this universe's power cosmic, meaning he could now pursue more flesh throughout the entire universe and bring the zombie plague to the rest of the doomed cosmos. Coming in at number 10, we have the intelligent zombie Solomon Grundy. Inspired by a 19th century English nursery rhyme, Solomon Grundy was born centuries ago as a wealthy merchant, but after being murdered and having his body dumped in a swamp with mystical properties, he's now cursed to constantly be resurrected with slightly different properties each time. Usually being depicted as an incredibly physically strong zombie, Grundy's greatest power is his resilience to both magic and physical damage, meaning that every time he's faced by Batman, he needs to figure out a whole new clever plan to find a way to properly defeat him. Coming in at number 9, we've got to go with Clayface. When you're facing off against the world's greatest detective, being able to disguise yourself as anyone seems like a pretty useful skill to have. This alone would make Clayface a difficult foe for Batman to overcome, but combine that with the huge amounts of physical strength that Clayface possesses when he changes into his more monstrous Hulk-like form, and you have a rare mix of stealth and strength that keeps Bruce Wayne on his toes. This ability to manipulate others through careful mimicry allows Clayface to be far more intelligent than he appears. And while his skill as an actor comes across as funny in depictions such as the Harley Quinn TV show, it can be quite deadly under more serious circumstances. Coming in at number 8, we've got to go with the bladed assassin, Deathstroke. While in recent years, Slade Wilson has become more well-known for tormenting the Teen Titans, Deathstroke has also had many run-ins with the Justice League and the Dark Knight himself. With his brain operating at 9 times the efficiency of a normal human brain, Deathstroke is exactly the type of opponent that pushes Batman to his physical limits, with a complete mastery of every weapon he has at his disposal. Combine that with his Icon suit, which has been shown to even be able to withstand a punch from metahumans such as Superman, and this is a foe that Batman is always just barely able to outwit and defeat. Coming in at number 7, we have the malicious psychologist known as Hugo Strange. One of Batman's oldest villains, originally debuting only a few issues after the Caped Crusader himself in Detective Comics, Professor Hugo Strange was also one of the very first villains to ever figure out his secret identity as Bruce Wayne. While initially depicted as a typical mad scientist stereotype, more recent interpretations of the character have seen him as a devious manipulator, using his position of power as a doctor of psychology to examine the criminals of Arkham Asylum and scheming to gain power throughout Gotham City. It's this emphasis on mental ability rather than actual superpowers that makes Hugo Strange such an interesting villain to deal with, and the fact that he's consistently been able to figure out Batman's biggest secret in multiple different universes means that Hugo Strange just might be one of Bruce Wayne's biggest threats. Coming in at number 6, we have Bane, the villain who broke the Bat. A brilliant tactical warrior who was raised from childhood inside an island prison, Bane's most notable act was when he systematically eliminated Batman's support system and eventually faced and bested him in single combat, shattering Bruce Wayne's spine over his knee. This victory over the Dark Knight was only temporary, but has still given Bane an intimidating reputation that he more than lives up to, going on to become a supervillain crime boss and proving that Bane isn't just about pure physical strength, but that he's also a ruthless and brutal strategist as well, even willing to kill Alfred Pennyworth just to emotionally shatter Damian Wayne. It just goes to show that you should never ever underestimate Bane. Coming in at number 5, we have Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin. The owner of the Iceberg Lounge, perhaps the most famous criminal hangout in all of Gotham City, the Penguin might look similar to his namesake, but is far more deadly in reality. While an impressive crime lord even without any superhuman enhancements, the Penguin is made extra deadly by the special umbrella he carries, which is always stuffed to the brim with different lethal gadgets to help him fight against Batman or any other supervillain that seems interested in starting a turf war. This unpredictability and Oswald's sanity not quite being all there make the Penguin an incredibly difficult opponent to read, hiding the fact that this crime lord is far more dangerous than he initially appears. Coming in at number 4, we've got the reality warping Batmite. A troublesome imp from the same fifth dimension as the Superman villain Mr. Mxyzptlk, the Batmite is honestly more of a nuisance than a flat-out supervillain, often appearing just to try and challenge Batman or to see more of his heroic acts. Sending Batmite back to his own dimension is usually a tall order given his complete reality warping powers, but luckily the world's greatest detective is usually smart enough to outwit Batmite and send him packing to where he truly belongs. However, fifth-dimensional beings have nearly limitless power within our regular three-dimensional universe, meaning that Batmite should probably have a close eye kept on him in the future. Coming in at number 3, we have Arthur Brown, aka the Clue Master. Not to be confused with the similarly themed Riddler, the Clue Master is a former game show host who wound up turning to crime in order to pay the bills. The father of Batman ally Spoiler, the Clue Master for a time seemed to embrace the role of being a second-rate supervillain, before it was eventually revealed that his status as a Riddler ripoff was actually intentional, and that organizing Batman's more underrated foes was his master plan all along to avoid detection. It's not often that a villain is able to temporarily outwit the Caped Crusader, and Clue Master shows just how powerful the right man with a plan can become. Coming in at number 2, we've got Poison Ivy. Born under the name of Pamela Isley, Poison Ivy has always been dead set on protecting the green plant life of the planet Earth, and especially values it over human life. While well known for being able to control plants and utilizing poisonous kisses as a weapon, Ivy's powers may be beyond what she usually shows off. In a particularly noteworthy storyline, Poison Ivy was able to mind control essentially the entire human population of Earth through their consumption of fruits and vegetables. And while that's definitely some weird comic book logic as to how that would work, Batman was only barely able to defeat her by bringing her into contact with the one human being she cares about the most, Harley Quinn. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Batman Who Laughs. In a dark alternate world where the Joker realizes he's dying and begins a mass killing spree of everyone in Gotham, Batman is forced to finally kill his iconic foe. Unfortunately, at the moment of death, Bruce Wayne is infected with a special brand of Joker venom that completely flips his moral compass, but leaves intact all of his intelligence and tactical planning. all of the chaos of the Joker with the brains of Batman, this supervillain is Bruce Wayne's worst nightmare come to life, and was able to become so powerful over the course of his war against the multiverse that he was only able to be defeated by a literal God mode powered Wonder Woman.
Number 10, Sportsmaster. Starting off with a pretty vanilla villain, Lawrence Crusher Croc was a very competitive sportsman who excelled at many sports, but he never played fair. Doing anything possible to win, he was eventually banned from playing any sport at a professional level, which for some reason led him to a life of crime. I don't know why. After a run-in with the Green Lantern, he supposedly dies, but it's revealed that he actually just faked his death, and that's when he became the Sportsmaster. After little success as a solo villain, Croc decided to join the Injustice Society, but after a series of crimes, he ends up in jail for a while. After serving his time, he teamed up with the Huntress and actually ended up marrying her, has a daughter, and then the three of them committed crimes together as one big happy crime family. Croc does eventually lose his life at the hands of the Human Flame following the events of Final Crisis though. With basically no superpowers other than being pretty good at sports, it's no wonder this villain has been forgotten in time. Check him out in his first appearance, All-American Comics number 85. Number 9, The Eraser. Probably the villain with the most interesting attire on this list today, Leonard Fiasco actually went to high school alongside Bruce Wayne. Due to his low grades, he actually ended up dropping out of school and turned to a life of crime as the villain Eraser. He apparently chose that name as a reminder of his constant failures during his school life, and also because he wanted to provide a special service to the criminals of Gotham City. Donning an eraser helmet that looks exactly like the top of a pencil, and alongside his signature yellow suit, he has been seen throughout the years erasing every trace of evidence left at any crime scene, making it impossible for the police to find any clues. And he does such a good job of it that he manages to stump Batman and Robin from time to time. He is eventually caught by the dynamic duo though after they infiltrate his hideout, and not much has been seen of him since. If you're interested in his story, check him out in his first appearance in 1966, Batman number 188. Number 8, Condiment King. Now with a name like Mitchell Mayo, it makes sense that this villain's name would be the Condiment King. Once an inmate of Arkham Asylum, Mayo somehow managed to break out, but was immediately subdued by Batman and Catwoman. His dream was to one day open a restaurant on Coney Island, and he actually does achieve that, stating he's turned legit and wants nothing more than to leave his life of crime behind. However, he does later don his suit once more and does his best to wreak havoc against Batman and Nightwing. Possessing no powers whatsoever, Mayo relies heavily on his gadgets, the most prominent being his condiment guns. These guns shoot a variety of sauces including ketchup, barbecue sauce, mustard, and more. However, it's kinda useless because it doesn't shoot anything at a high enough pressure to be lethal. The best it can do is create a nasty stain and just ruin your day. Check out this villain for yourself in his first appearance in Birds of Prey Volume 1 number 37, or in his New 52 reintroduction in 2016's Batman Volume 3 number 9. Number 7, we have Johnny Karaoke. The crooning Yakuza loan shark is the next on our list today. Definitely not the most fearsome of Batman foes, however, this villain is way too interesting to stay buried for too long. After all, you've got to respect any American fearsome enough to rise through the ranks of the Yakuza. Although he seems like a very happy-go-lucky kind of guy, this is all an act because once you let your guard down around him, he'll whip out his cane that doubles as a microphone and a sword and do whatever he feels is necessary to protect himself and his geisha girls. Though he hasn't really made any appearances outside of his first appearance in 2007's Batman number 660, the character Jonathan John Charisma Brown from Batman Arkham Knight is heavily influenced by him and likely an homage to the smooth-talking Elvis impersonator. Like many lesser-known Batman villains, Johnny does not possess any powers other than the ability to sing pretty well, but his connection to the Yakuza combined with his own skills makes him a fairly dangerous foe. Number 6, Flamingo. Edward Flamingo, known professionally as the Assassin Flamingo, is truly ruthless, and I'm genuinely surprised he hasn't appeared in the media more. As an emotionless, unfeeling killer with the odd tendency to eat his victims' faces after he's killed them, Flamingo has proven to be a formidable foe as he is able to temporarily paralyze Damian Wayne, and would have killed him if it lasted longer, showing that he has no problem killing anyone whatsoever. He even nearly killed the Red Hood and would have gotten away with it if it weren't for the intervention of Dick Grayson, who had recently taken up the mantle of Batman after Bruce Wayne's death. As a master assassin, Flamingo has the know-how to use pretty much every firearm imaginable, and thanks to his iconic pink motorcycle, he is rarely caught. Described as an evil Zorro by his creator Grant Morrison, why not check him out for yourself in 2007's Batman number 666. Number 5, Maxi Zeus. Chronologically the fourth Batman villain to be committed to Arkham Asylum behind the Joker, Two-Face, and Rupert Thorne, Maximilian started out with pretty humble beginnings as a Greek history teacher. After his wife dies from unrevealed circumstances, Zeus loses his sanity and becomes a crime lord, using his intelligence and resources to rise to power in Gotham's underworld. Upon his very first murder though, he is thwarted by Batman and committed to Arkham Asylum, where he escaped from many times, one of which Batman actually let slide, as it was so he could go wish his daughter happy birthday. With each escape leading him to lose more and more of his sanity, Zeus eventually gets to a point where he joins forces with the children of Ares, Deimos, Phobos, and Eris, to help merge Gotham City with Ares' throne capital, the Areopagus. Maxie is actually killed as a result of this whole plot, and his sacrifice is what brings the return of Ares, who is thankfully stopped by Wonder Woman. Funnily enough, it's actually revealed about a year later that Maxie is alive and well and running an illegal casino that eventually gets shut down thanks to a tip from the boy Wonder, and Maxie is sent back to jail without any struggle. You've probably guessed it, but this guy doesn't have any powers either. Basically, his knowledge as a history teacher and his ability to lead got him as far as possible, which is pretty impressive if you ask me. Check him out in his first appearance in 1979's Detective Comics number 483. Number 4. Dollhouse. As the daughter of Barton Mathis, known best as the Dollmaker, Matilda Mathis commits crimes and operates under the name Dollhouse. From a young age, she was taught how to hunt and slaughter people, and usually wore a doll face that was grafted over her own when committing these crimes. Forced to go into hiding after her father's business starts to go wrong after he kidnaps Batman, she is the only one of his children to actually end up resurfacing and to carry on the family business later on. Dollhouse picks up right where her father left off, taking Gotham's more misfortunate citizens and making money off of their organs through the black market. Like Dollmaker, Matilda turns the bodies into dolls, of which she actually keeps more than a few for her own dollhouse. Making her first appearance in 2011's Detective Comics Volume 2, Number 2, check out her twisted upbringing for yourself and let me know in the comments below what you think. Number 3. The Ventriloquist. Since his debut in Detective Comics number 583, 3 versions of the Ventriloquist have perplexed audiences. These versions being Arnold Wesker, Peyton Riley, and New 52's Shauna Belzer, but let's focus on Wesker as he is the best known of the 3. Because of his multiple personality disorder, Wesker uses a ventriloquist dummy to commit mob-related crimes. This doll, famously named Scarface for his Al Capone-like appearance, controls Wesker and the crime business they run. If Scarface isn't present, then Wesker projects an identity onto another inanimate object, usually sock puppets or anything else that he can use as a puppet. First appearing in 1988's Detective Comics number 583, we've seen Wesker as a member of the Secret Society of Supervillains, the Black Lantern Corps, and even the Justice League of Arkham, with all the stories and battles leading up to his tragic death in 2006's Detective Comics number 818. A year after surviving Luthor's attempt to recreate the multiverse, we see the Great White Shark burst into Wesker's apartment and kill him with a single shot to the head. Man, it's such a sad way to go for such a good villain. Number 2. Professor Pig. Laszlo Valentine, aka Professor Pig, and that's P-Y-G not P-I-G, was a former agent of Spiral driven mad by his own mind-eroding drugs, and he was an enemy of Dick Grayson and Damian Wayne during their time as Batman and Robin. Characterized as a schizophrenic, Pig's mental illness explains many of his habits, one of the most prominent being his desire to make everything perfect. Now, how does he go about accomplishing this task? Well, by unleashing Dollatrons and mind-altering substances onto Gotham City. The Dollatrons are at the center of Professor Pig's story depravity, being brainwashed people who followed his every command as though they were robots. And though they act as his loyal minions, the Dollatrons are actually very much expendable and have been replaced many, many times. Despite his mental illness, Valentine is still a formidable foe with a mastery of basic hand-to-hand combat and a high-level proficiency with a knife, since they were once an incredible surgeon able to perform complicated surgeries, once actually switching a hand with a foot. Making their first appearance alongside Flamingo in 2007's Batman number 666, check out their origin story for yourself or read their New 52 introduction in Batman Volume 2 number 1. And finally, number 1, the Phantasm. Created for the DC animated movie Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Andrea Beaumont treads that line between good and evil as the vigilante, the Phantasm. Her and Bruce were university sweethearts and actually had plans to get married one day. However, her father was a rich businessman who got involved with the wrong kind of people and ended up having to go into hiding, and eventually all that got him killed. This drove Andrea to take revenge on all those who were a member of the criminal gang who killed her father, especially Jack Napier, who ended up becoming the Clown Prince of Crime. To take her revenge on Chucky Soul, Buzz Bronski, and Sal Valestra, she dons the mantle of the Phantasm, a figure that kind of resembles the Grim Reaper, complete with a scythe that she wears over her right hand. Using her father's money to hone her skills, she returns to Gotham years later to complete her goal of killing all the mob bosses. However, she does not get the chance to kill the Joker as Batman ends up intervening. Years later, she does kind of redeem herself by not killing Terry McGinnis' parents after being hired to, but after After causing so much bloodshed, I really think she's more on the evil side of things. If you want to see her story for yourself, check out Batman Mask of the Phantasm and let me know what you think.
Number 10. Jonathan Walker. US agent might be a hero now in the comics, but when he started out in the 616 continuity, he was manipulated into becoming a villain. Jonathan Walker was initially known as antagonistic hero Super Patriot, who did his best to discredit Captain America, claiming that he himself stood for the United States' true ideals. As a result of Red Skull's meddling and manipulation, he was appointed to replace Steve Rogers as the new Captain America after Rogers stepped down as the government actually owned the title and refused to let him keep the title if he wasn't going to be working for them. As Captain America, Walker took a very extreme and violent approach that put him into direct conflict with Rogers, who was currently going by the mantle of the Captain. In the end, the Captain defeated Walker, and after Skull's involvement in the ordeal was revealed, the two ended up teaming up to take him down, starting off on Walker's path to redemption as hero US agent. Number 9. Cap Wolf. Werewolf Captain America isn't as much an alternate version of Cap as it is a distinct moment in Cap's history where he happened to be transformed into a werewolf. Captain America ends up becoming a werewolf while on the trail of Colonel John Jameson, who had gone missing. Captain America himself had reason to suspect that something awful had happened to Jameson, who it seemed may be plagued by his wolf side once more. Jameson was known in the past for operating as Man-Wolf. It seemed as though a wolf-like creature or werewolf was responsible for a series of murders. In the end, however, Cap's trail ended up leading him into a much more complex and disturbing plot where a villain was attempting to use a recreated Werewolf by Night wolf serum to turn people into werewolves. Captain America became one of their victims and for a time became a werewolf himself. Granted, he was still a hero at this point, but werewolves in general are considered to be somewhat uncontrollable monsters who are at least occasionally ruled by their own bloodlust. So I think we can at least partially count Cap Wolf. Also, I needed to complete the monster trifecta. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Captain America lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. MCU US Agents. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, US Agent John Walker accidentally becomes an evil version of Captain America without really intending to do that. Really, it's more complicated than him just being straight up evil, as it is with most Marvel Cinematic Universe antagonists. Walker really wants to do right by the Captain America mantle and do it justice. He's a soldier who has worked super hard to earn this title, but also, although his heart might be in the right place, that doesn't mean that he knows the best way to approach replacing Cap or doing right by his legacy. Walker ends up becoming misguided as a result of dealing with so much disrespect from those around him, and as a result of him not being, as powerful as Cap would be because he doesn't have the super soldier serum. He realizes that being chosen and respected as the new Captain America by the government doesn't necessarily mean that the people of the United States will also respect you, nor that Steve's actual allies and friends will respect you as his replacement either. After he loses his own best friend, Lamar Hoskins, he becomes completely fed up with trying to figure out how to do what's right and instead decides to do what he feels needs to be done. This makes him much more violent and much more dangerous, turning him into an enemy of Falcon and Winter Soldier and leading the government to later on remove his title, his honors, and basically just overall dismiss him. Fortunately, the US agent still found a place on what will likely be either the MCU Thunderbolts or Dark Avengers team. TBD, or at least to be declared, if not to be determined. Number 7. Mutant Captain America. This version of Captain America was a mutant who ended up replacing the original Captain America after he died in a Sentinel attack. He wasn't just given the mantle of Cap either, but also ended up receiving the super soldier serum. He had this and his own mutant powers besides, which made him pretty crazy powerful. Although the mutant version of Cap had good intentions, his powers were somewhat uncontrollable, which was a big problem. His powers going haywire was what ended up causing the death of his own group, the Six, and the Avengers, who he was at the time fighting against. This caused him to lose his sanity, turning him into a full-on villain and a loose cannon who attacked and defeated pretty much everyone who came after him, except Havoc, who managed to successfully kill and defeat the crazed mutant version of Captain America. Poor mutant Captain America, it sounds like it was a rough go, Number 6. Zombie Colonel America. What's worse than a werewolf Cap? a zombie Cap, obviously. This is the version of Captain America that we get in the Marvel Zombieverse. Although really, this isn't Captain America as a zombie, it's Colonel America, because that is Steve Rogers' hero mantle in this reality. Here, Colonel America was infected and turned into a zombie during that first confrontation with a zombified Sentry, which the Avengers responded to in downtown New York. Zombie Cap was responsible for turning Spider-Man into a zombie, biting him after he himself was infected. He was one of the zombies to fight against the villains for who should get the remains of Galactus' corpse, and of course with it the power cosmic, which would enable them to travel to other worlds, which they then could devour. However, Zombie Cap was defeated by his nemesis, a zombified Red Skull. So, no power cosmic for him. He dead. He's double dead. Really. Number 5. William Burnside. William Burnside was the Captain America of the 1950s, who ended up being retconned to not actually be Steve Rogers at all, although he was a man who believed he was Steve Rogers. This version of Captain America was later revealed to be William Burnside initially, a man who was hired to replace Captain America after he went missing in World War II. This version of Captain America was racist and extremely anti-communist, echoing the McCarthy communist witch hunts of those times. Burnside legally changed his name to Steven Rogers and would have an extended lifespan thanks to a version of the super soldier serum that he was exposed to. However, because this was not a perfected version of the serum, it apparently would also cause him to become more extreme over time as his psyche and mind degraded as a result, so made him pretty crazy and pretty evil. Number 4. Evil Clone. An evil clone with the mind of Red Skull. To be honest, this has happened multiple times in the comics, where Red Skull has ended up having his consciousness, his personality, or his memories, or some combination of those, into the clone of Steve Rogers. It's happened both in the main continuity and in alternate universes. For this version though, we're going to be talking about issue 350 of Captain America, where the Red Skull in Steven Rogers' clone body ends up being the mastermind behind the whole commission/Walker kerfuffle that we talked about earlier on this list. His plan this time around in a Steve Rogers' clone body is to discard his previous ideologies and use capitalism itself to dismantle the democracy of America and destroy the nation from the inside out. It doesn't work out in the end, and the issue ends with him facing off against both John Walker and the Captain and becoming deformed once more by the red dust of death. But he did try it. He did try. And don't worry, he would come back in more clone bodies. That's how he do. Number 3. Vampire King. This version of Captain America comes from the Exile series, where he becomes King of the Vampires. In the alternate reality of Earth 3931 during World War II by Baron Blood. Baron Blood turns him into a vampire. Vampire Cap is definitely not a good dude, likely the most evil of all the monstrous Captain Americas listed here. This version of Captain America has his own sinister version of the Avengers and Thralls, who he enlists and forces to fight for him. However, he still proves to be no match for the Exiles, who end up defeating and decapitating him in the end. Number 2. President Red Skull. Not an alternate version of Steve Rogers, but an alternate version of Red Skull who beat Rogers and took to wearing his Captain America suit off and around his new redecorated Oval Office. This alternate version of Red Skull comes from the Old Man Logan universe, where Red Skull ends up appointing himself the new president of the US, which he renames America. America with a K. Red Skull ends up not just defeating Captain America, but also almost all of the superhero community when he manages to rally together an impossible to defeat force of supervillains who coordinate their attack on the nation. Being that he's Red Skull, he's probably one of the most evil versions of Captain America out there because he's Red Skull, although like I said, he's not fully a Cap ultimately, but he definitely evil, so. And he does wear that suit a lot. Number 1. Hydra Supreme. This alternate version of Captain America was initially retconned to be the version of Captain America. Steven Rogers ended up being revealed as a Hydra sleeper agent in one of the biggest twists in comic book history. All his heroic actions had apparently just been Steve buying time and building trust so that he'd be in the perfect position to take over the US and could then reveal his true colors. Hail Hydra to this day is one of the most iconic lines ever uttered uttered by the supposed hero. However, it all turned out that this version of Cap wasn't the real Steve Rogers of 616. Instead, what happened was Kobik, the sentient living version of the Cosmic Cube, was convinced by Red Skull that reality should be warped so that Cap could become an agent of Hydra. When this happened, the real heroic version of Captain America ended up trapped within a shard of the Cosmic Cube, and the now altered version of the character took his place in the reality of 616. In the end, the true Cap would be freed from the shard and would end up fighting and defeating his evil Hydra Supreme alternate version. And if you're worried, don't worry, the shard was made bigger, so it wasn't like little tiny Cap running around.
In at 10, Rainbow Raider. The reason that all the good guys are good is because of their morals. Because they channel their anger into something positive. Because they can control themselves. But what happens when a hero with powers like Superman is filled with a red-hot rage? Well, we saw it in Injustice. But someone able to cause those emotions, that person being Rainbow Raider, makes them pretty damn powerful. Rainbow Raider's power is derived entirely from their special goggles, okay? Which allows him to project solid beams of rainbow-colored light that he can either use offensively or as a slide for travel, and he can also coat people in certain colors of light to induce emotions, like blue for sadness, red for anger. There's also the Rainbow Raiders, a team of super color-themed villains that also have powers based on the color of their rainbow. However, just the ability to induce emotion by covering someone in light is enough to make Roy G. Bigelow pretty damn powerful. If all my rage came out and I had super speed, damn, people would have to like hide in fear, but it wouldn't matter because I would find them. And at 9, Zoom. I included a CW character on this list specifically for the guy in my DMs who told me to stop doing it. The CW version of Zoom was not exactly what everyone was expecting, although you have to admit he is one of the best and scariest villains in the Arrowverse to date. The sheer demonic look he had, especially with the suit, shook even me. However, thanks to the Velocity 9 that he was taking, Hunter Zolomon was incredibly fast, the fastest we had ever seen at that point. So fast even that in order to fight him, Barry had to take speed out of the equation. And during the final fight, Barry had to create a time remnant because he wasn't fast enough to stop Zoom with only one of him. It only got worse after Zoom kidnapped Wally and Barry had to give Zoom his speed in order to get Wally back. This only made Zoom faster. It gets even worse when in the final fight the Time Wraiths come out of the Speed Force and take Zoom, which changes him into the Black Flash, and then he gets supercharged by the Speed Force to become the living embodiment of death for all speedsters. Plus, I mean, this guy was able to create breaches at will to bring hundreds of metahumans over to Earth 1. That's pretty damn impressive. And at 8, Johnny Quick. Johnny Allen, alias Johnny Quick, is a criminal speedster from Earth 3. Together with his girlfriend and partner in crime Atomica, he was a member of the crime syndicate. Johnny Allen was a high-profile criminal, on the run with his equally criminal girlfriend. Cornered on the roof of Central City's Star Labs, Allen was struck by a bolt of lightning which shattered the roof. The duo fell into the lab space below, with Allen landing amid the chemicals that gave, presumably, Earth 1 Barry his speed. Something in this incident, probably the chemicals, granted him his super speed, and he went on to become a super criminal alongside his girlfriend, who had also been given powers. While his girlfriend took on the name Atomica, he took on the name Johnny Quick. The couple joined the crime syndicate at some point after this, and they ran through Central City, answering to no one, until one day the White House burned, around the time of Darkseid's incursion onto Earth Prime. The being that had destroyed Ultraman's Krypton came to Earth, and an alliance of supercriminals formed to find a way to safety. So yeah, it's basically just Barry Allen, but Earth 3. I say that's pretty overpowered. And at 7, Weather Wizard. Meteorological madman known as the Weather Wizard was a menace to both Barry Allen and Wally West's Flash, and one of the most overpowered supercriminals they've ever faced. First appearing in 1959's The Flash number 110, criminal Mark Martin armed himself with the Weather Wand, an advanced piece of technology which could control like atoms in the universe, some form of energy, okay? Martin took the wand from his deceased brother, a scientist who never intended it to leave his lab. With some modifications, it became a deadly weapon for the criminal, and at full power, the wand could summon lightning storms, rain clouds, or change the weather entirely. Whatever the weather was, Martin could use his mighty powers to rob banks and cause mass panic. A later reimagining of the Weather Wizard would see him instead granted the metahuman ability to control the elements without using the wand. And the Weather Wizard also appeared in the CW's Flash TV show as one of the many metahumans created by the particle accelerator explosion which gave Barry Allen his powers. However, on the show there are 2 versions, one of them appearing in the first episode which Joe West killed, and the second appearing in the 16th episode of that season, with the second one being the first's older brother, the Martin brothers, Clyde being the first one, and Mark being the second, and the proper Weather Wizard. As Cisco said, he's been waiting to use that name since day one. And at 6, Gorilla Grodd. Gorilla Grodd is a Flash rogue from Africa's Gorilla City. The original Grodd, which debuted in DC Comics in 1959, was a telepath who could control other animals and also had a form of mind control as well over humans. In the New 52, all inhabitants of Gorilla City had accelerated mental attributes due to the Speed Force, but Grodd was still the superior member of the species. On The Flash in the CW, Grodd was a very intelligent gorilla experimented on at Star Labs to try and create a super soldier for the US government. However, the torture and unethical treatment of the gorilla caused him to grow angry and evil, and he escaped seeking vengeance. Grodd had powerful mind control powers on top of superhuman strength and enhanced intellect, and at one point even combined with the Flash to be a psychopathic, telepathic gorilla with super speed. So I think it's safe to say that we should all be scared of Gorilla Grodd. Plus, his pop figure is pretty damn cool. Halfway through into number 5, Savitar. The fact that Barry Allen was able to just beat this whole Savitar thing from The Flash Season 3 will always escape me. I won't really ever understand how they actually ended up defeating a literal version of Barry from the future. Like, I get how they managed to do it, but it was still incredibly unrealistic, since technically Savitar would have known beforehand that the timeline was changing, since technically that should, in my brain, at least be how time travel works, but this ended up being how it works in the show, so that's fine, I guess. I don't see how it ever would have been possible to defeat a future version of the Flash without this though, but I know that he couldn't really die, since if he died, Savitar wouldn't be able to happen. A future version of the Flash is always going to be mega OP, okay? I said it. In at 4, Mirror Master. While Mirror Master never seemed like much more than a B-grade supervillain in Flash's Rogues Gallery, his power has made him so much more. Before he became a Flash version, the second Mirror Master, Evan McCulloch, was an assassin in Scotland and was already a formidable foe. However, once he got his mirror gun, he became insanely powerful. The mirror gun gives Mirror Master the ability to travel to an alternate dimension by entering and exiting any reflective surface. On top of being a significant pain in the Flash's side, Mirror Master has also fought Animal Man and was someone that gave him all he could handle. The CW used the Sam Scudder version, and he was only a minor villain, and then they kinda did Eva McCulloch for season 7, but honestly, even Sam being able to travel through mirrors like that, trapping the Flash in the mirror dimension for a time, this guy is certainly underestimated. Although I hope that they find a way to explore maybe some of his abilities in later comics or even the show. I'd like to see that. Getting close to the end, in number 3, the Shade. This Golden Age Flash foe is one of the most powerful and most terrifying, but he isn't always on the side of evil, luckily. First appearing in Flash Comics number 33 from 1942, this immortal conduit for dark energy was a formidable enemy for Jay Garrick and often caused problems, the speedster with his weaponized shadows. Kind of like my demons, causing me all kinds of problems as well. Initially depicted as a common criminal for the Flash to stop from robbing banks and menacing Keystone City in the 40s, the Shade was eventually reimagined as something much more sinister. Originally possessing a magic cane allowing him to control darkness, the revamped 90s Shade was given a real identity of Richard Swift and an endless supply of supernatural abilities. Returning to menace the hero Starman and eventually becoming his ally, the Shade used his powers of shadow manipulation, time travel, teleportation, and intangibility for both good and evil. The Shade also had his own dimension, the Shadowlands, where unwitting enemies would become trapped. And I think that having his own dimension earns him a spot in the top 3. Just saying. Penultimately, in at number 2, Red Death. Red Death is a speedster that is an evil combination of Batman and the Flash, which already sounds terrifying. Wait until you hear the story. The Bruce Wayne of Earth 52 started off fighting crime with Robin, but because, you know, of course, Robins kept dying left, right, and center. So, understandably, Batman got darker and darker, becoming more extreme with his methods. He started killing people, which honestly seems more realistic to me, aside from just being done fighting crime totally, which can't happen, otherwise they wouldn't have a story, right? This eventually leads him to Barry, who refuses to give Bruce his Speed Force powers, understandably because again, this time Batman's a psycho. So, Batman, using the various rogues' weapons to fight Barry, knocks him out. Once Barry was unconscious, Bruce tied him to the front of a cosmic treadmill modified Batmobile, I don't know how the hell he did that, and then drives them both into the Speed Force. Again, I don't know how that happened or works logically, but okay. You do you, Bat Marty, we gotta get Back to the Future, your kids are in danger. When entering the Speed Force, Barry and Bruce again somehow ended up fusing together into an evil Batman with super speed and a lust for killing. And while Barry's mind was trapped inside Bruce's body, so he could just watch. He then gets a visit from the Batman Who Laughs, who was part of the Dark Knights and whose goal was conquering the multiverse, and since he was a version of Batman who was psycho, he was like, hey you, come here, come with me, we're the same kind of. And finally, in number 1, Black Lantern Reverse Flash. The Black Lantern Corps is a group of various dead superheroes and villains alike who were raised by Necron and each given a Black Lantern ring. This ring grants them power over death, and these rings are powered by the Anti-Monitor, as he is present within the Black Lantern power battery. Those raised by the Black Lantern ring are in essence resurrected to where they were before death, but their mind is warped to serve Necron's purpose. Now they aren't really like fully resurrected, but that's kind of like the best analogy that we have. Those with the ring have various powers, including a healing factor, aura recognition, which allows them to see powerful emotions, energy spectrum assimilation, which lets them extract the hearts of individuals they've slain, and use their last feelings to charge the central battery and their ring by 0.01%, because you know that's a lot, it's worth it. And they, much like zombies, can infect others by biting them. A bite from a Black Lantern will slowly kill the one bitten, and then turn them into a Black Lantern upon death. Yeah, basically zombies with superpowers, so definitely not something to laugh at, especially when it's the man who killed Barry Allen's mother for the fun of it.